All in Sports Network. We love sports.
It is Tuesday, March 11th, and we are in the swing of things when it comes to March Madness tournament, conference tournament play, baseball, softball season, a lot of sports happening. Also the start to NFL free agency, but this is a primary Texas Longhorn podcast. This is your daily fix for all things Texas Longhorns right here on All in Horns, brought to you by Rogue Sports Network. I'm Tanner Carlson. That is Jake Jimerson, and we've got a fun episode for you today as we recap the weekend's happenings, whether that be the women's SEC tournament, and then now finishing out the regular season of men's basketball, going into the SEC tournament, losing to Oklahoma and the regular season finale. And we will discuss all of this moving forward, and then we'll touch on Texas baseball's historic start to their season, the best start that they have had since a national championship winning season. And so we will discuss that. And then probably tomorrow go in more detail about the softball tournament that happened over the weekend and upcoming conference play against number 3 Florida for softball, and as well as Mississippi State for the men's side of things for baseball as we move into the rest of the week. We've got a full week of episodes coming up for you. Again, we drop these episodes Tuesdays through Saturdays at noon, 5 days a week. Please like, share, and subscribe. Jake, how was the weekend?
The Dallas Stars saved my weekend. That is the story of the weekend, is the Dallas Stars trading for Mikko Rantanen kind of saved my weekend. I had home stuff come up that ended up costing a lot of money and was not a fun process. That just started with a water heater needing to be replaced, ended up being a whole bunch of piping we had to redo. Was not a fun process, but on the bright side, we're alive because apparently our plumber was confused as to how we were still alive and didn't have a carbon monoxide issue.
Yeah, you were dealing with a literal life or death situation over the weekend, Jake.
Yeah, I didn't really believe. I thought it was kind of salesman talk until we took the old flue piping down that comes out of our, we have gas. And so it came out of our HVAC and our water heater. And then they pulled the piping out, and it was thin metal that had rusted in certain parts and then had burned through. And so when we put it down, like, holes just disintegrated into it.
So, Jake, I got a question for you. How did that pass inspection whenever you bought the house?
That's a great question. I wish you could sue inspectors. Unfortunately, they are pretty much covered because it is their opinion and case law against it, because I've looked it up. Trust me. I've asked lawyers in my office and everything. And yeah, there's just not really a good way to go about suing an inspector, though my inspector deserves to be sued because they basically only told us that because the piping came out diagonal out of the wall from the HVAC and then cuts this way into the laundry room. I know, great podcasting. And then out of the house and then goes up like 3 feet. The code is for every 6 inches, like diagonal or sideways you go, that's not straight up, you have to go a foot straight up. We were going about 3 feet straight up and about 10 to 15 feet sideways. Now that is all taken care of.
Yeah.
Which is very painful. And I was learning about this Friday. I was at work. My wife came home early, and I wasn't really going to come home. And then I got the call that the plumber basically was like, I will not put in a new water heater.
Yeah.
Because that would be like a doctor committing malpractice.
This all started because of your water heater going out.
Yes, though we had known the piping was done in a very janky way because we had an HVAC company come out when our HVAC went out and was like, I will repair your HVAC, but if you need a new HVAC, I will not put it in with this piping. And the only reason the piping's like that is because they redid our kitchen, made it look really pretty, but originally the piping just went straight up and where the kitchen is now and out. There was a wall there and the kitchen opening was smaller. They opened that up, which I love, but they did it in a really janky way by making the flue pipe go out a different way than the way it's supposed to.
And this is a house that was built when?
In the 50s.
Yeah.
And so, it was single-walled piping that was coming out. Single-walled, very thin. I wouldn't even call it metal. And now we have double walled. It's thick. You can touch it, not burn yourself, because that happened with the other one when I was trying to check it, and feels much more safe. And so yeah, you almost lost your co-host.
I would be going solo, and well, not really solo, 100% solo. For those listening on the podcast, I've got a tiny human climbing all over me, but
daylight savings.
Yeah. So we've got the girls trying to adjust to the time change, and that is not the easiest thing to do whenever you lose an hour. So for them, it's not bedtime, So, but it should be bedtime, and so you need to go lay down in bed. Yeah, and so. But anyway, we do have all the sports to cover for you today and a weekend recap, starting with the women's SEC tournament. First game won against Ole Miss 70-63, kind of a closer game than maybe what some would have expected. Beat LSU as well on the second day. 56-49, and then in less than 24 hours had to turn around and play the essentially co-champions of the regular season in South Carolina, in which you split that series with on very little to no rest. Got out of the LSU game around 10 o'clock, probably didn't get to your hotel and in bed and asleep by close to midnight. And then you had to turn around by 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock, and go play your SEC championship game against South Carolina, of all teams. Not making up any excuses by any means, but just setting the scene for what they had to kind of overcome. First of all, I get it's an SEC tournament. It's a conference tournament. They go by quickly. You can't spend too much time on them. You've got to get into March Madness tournament. But come on, give me at least 24 hours to play my next game.
Well, I just don't understand why it's not an evening game. And
yeah.
I mean, I don't think it makes up 19 points, but
no.
At the same time, they looked sluggish. They looked slow. They looked tired.
Everything looked like they hadn't rest. They hadn't been able to kind of recover from the last games. And that's the way they played. And that's fine. It happens.
Yeah. The good news is I don't think it really matters. They're still going to be a 1 seed. I mean, I would be floored if they weren't a 1 seed, just because of losing that game to South Carolina in what was essentially a home game for South Carolina as well. But I will say that coin flip that we thought was kind of inconsequential ended up being a little bit of a bigger deal, just because I do think that scheduling was a fairly significant advantage. I mean, playing LSU was definitely the third best team in the SEC play. And so it stacked a little bit against Texas. But that being said, still made the SEC championship. We're co-champions of the regular season, and I will imagine will be a 1 seed come Sunday.
Yeah, and I think they needed to actually get to the championship game to be considered a 1 seed lock. I mean, you've got USC, you've got UCLA, you've got Notre Dame, you've got South Carolina, you've got a handful of teams right there that could easily make a case of jumping you and being the number 1 team. But I think making it to the SEC championship game, playing against South Carolina for a third time this season, I don't think that drops you outside of those number 1 seeds.
No, I mean, you would have to have more than likely, I would guess, actually right now, I think these rankings just came out. The rankings actually have Texas at 5 and USC at 4, which I don't think that should be the case. I mean, USC has an unranked loss to Iowa. They do have a win over 2 wins over UCLA and then a loss to UCLA in the final. So maybe Texas does end up a 2 seed, but I think that would be kind of bogus when they were essentially the number 1 team in the nation, and you're telling me 1 loss to South Carolina would drop you down to 2 seed. That being said, the rankings aren't what the committee deal in, and I don't imagine they're going to value that losing that conference championship game in a way of dropping them 2 to 4, 3 to 4 spots.
Yeah, and I don't think that that's what they'll do either. I'm like you said, I'm pretty certain that it's going to be a 1 seed, and so.
They had them at number 1 last week in the AP and dropped them to number 5 for beating LSU, who's a top 10 team, and losing to South Carolina. in a conference championship game. That
Right.
doesn't quite add up.
You can't really penalize them for that type of stretch. And then the way they finished the regular season with the ranked wins and getting to the number one seed in the number one ranking in the country, it just makes sense that they would be a one seed going into the tournament. Now, Jake, let's go ahead and flip the script to men's basketball.
I don't want to.
Rodney Terry sealing his fate. I mean, we now know you lose to Oklahoma against a program who you have essentially dominated in recent memory over the last, 5, 6 some odd years. And so, yeah, it feels like you lose that regular season opener, and you got Trey Johnson winning SEC Freshman of the Year, SEC Co-Offensive Player of the Year. You've got all kinds of accolades for the best player in your conference, which is the best conference in the nation in college basketball right now. And you lose to your bitter rival on the season finale and an awful stretch to end the regular season, essentially kicking you out of the tournament. And essentially it's all she wrote. I mean, at this point, but at least we now know moving forward, Rodney Terry, officially not the guy. He'll be out before long. As soon as the season ends, I'm assuming.
Yeah, I would be pretty surprised if Del Conte didn't make the move.
Go ahead and try to ramble on a little bit, by the way.
Okay. I would be and I can ramble on a little bit on this subject, but I would be pretty surprised if Del Conte didn't decide to move on from Rodney Terry at this point. He has a standard that he has set for all programs to reach. And when you don't reach that standard, I think he does give you some grace. But when you show year after year just declining performance, like this men's team did, and then really just embarrassing themselves come conference play, it's hard to imagine with the downfall that happened for the men's team that they would not go ahead and move on. I know reports kind of indicated he wanted to wait a season to make a move, but when you had the schedule laid out that Texas did, it felt like going down the stretch, and I'm trying to pull up the schedule here. That's why I'm looking over to the side, but you felt like it was more of a chance to improve what your seeding would be in the tournament versus making the tournament or not, because you went on that little stretch in the middle of the season where you played good basketball and you blew out LSU. And then from the blowout to LSU, they went 2-7. 2-7 in their last 9 games, including losses to Arkansas twice, at Vanderbilt, at South Carolina, a bad Georgia team at home, and a bad OU team at home.
Yep.
And that is losing to the bottom half. So once you get past Missouri and Ole Miss, which are kind of that 10-8 record. So like the teams with a winning record in the SEC
above 500.
Texas had gotten past that stretch and looked like, okay, all they got to do is just win half their last games with a very easy schedule, because the bottom half of the SEC, which I would consider is teams with a losing record in conference play, it was Arkansas, Mississippi State, Georgia, Vanderbilt, Oklahoma, LSU, South Carolina. You lost to every single one of those teams other than LSU and Mississippi State. You only played each of those teams once.
Yeah, no, I mean, like I said, you sealed your fate. One of the worst stretches of basketball in the final game, 5-6 game stretch, really after South Carolina. Losing to South Carolina was kind of that nail in the coffin for me, where I
would say after LSU, after LSU, the rest of the season was horrible.
Well, after LSU, I was thinking my hopes were pretty high. I was like, wait a second, we're playing pretty well. And then
that's when it went to crap.
And then after South Carolina, I said, okay, now we're officially done. Because you lose to Arkansas, you lose to Vanderbilt. You're like, okay, maybe we can get this back on track with a win over one of the next 2 teams, which is Alabama or Kentucky. And you got one of those wins. Okay, cool. We stole one. We dropped one we shouldn't have dropped. We stole one. So now let's get on a roll. And then you basically just completely flatline to finish off the rest of the season.
Here's what I'll say about the men's team. And this is the most disgusting stat I've ever seen. 81st in points per game in college basketball. That's not awful. 78 points a game. I don't really have a problem with that. 244th in assists per game
That's
at 13.2 a game.
That's dreadful.
In 168th in rebounding.
Where
The rebounding came somewhat
You-
expected. The assists per game, to me, is that is just a direct, especially with the scores they had on this team.
Yeah.
And to me, the downfall of this team was the inability to get all the pieces going at once, ever. And I mean, Jordan Pope.
Jake, there wasn't a single game where we had all 5 of your starters playing cohesively for not even a single game. Now, granted, there were injuries, but I can't go back and think of a game, not in conference, but meaningful basketball, not against Chicago State of the University of Illinois. I'm talking like in conference play, maybe LSU, but still, I don't think that there was a single game in conference play where I felt like all 5 starters were just clicking and cohesive and playing as one unit.
Yeah, I mean, your assist leader on the team was Julian Larry with 3 assists a game. Which was less assists than he averaged last. I mean, basically every single transfer that came in that we talked about, that we were excited about, all their statistics dropped from the prior year. And I don't know how you can't put that on coaching.
Now, I do think Texas's recruiting isn't really going to be overly affected by this. Now, it will depend a lot on the man that CDC decides to bring in to replace Rodney Terry. I trust whatever CDC does, it's going to be the right move. It'll be a well thought out and calculated move that will not affect the upcoming recruiting class, because I do know there's a 5-star out there, for I'm skipping out on the name, who has Texas as the top 3 option. And Texas will continue as long as we're pushing out lottery picks like Texas has in the last decade or so. The recruits will be coming. We need somebody to harness those recruits, match that up with the transfer portal, and get that on a regular basis and turning it into wins and tournament appearances.
Yeah. So just last thing I will say on this is Jordan Pope, probably the biggest get in the portal, because it was a battle against A&M straight up. He must regret that, which is depressing to say. And he had averaged 12.6 points a game his first season playing, just over 2 assists a game. Last year, he averaged 17.6 points a game, with about 3.5 assists per game. This year, he averaged 11 points a game at 1.8 assists per game, which was season low or career lows for him.
Yeah. I'm sure just about everybody on this roster had career lows offensively. I'd be shocked to see
Tremont Mark was the only year that was lower for him was his freshman year, his true freshman season.
Yeah.
He averaged 7.8 a game. He averaged 10 this year, 10.0 a game. That's his lowest.
Awful.
Also a career low for him in assists per game. And then you had Julian Larry, who, other than his very first freshman season, which was the COVID season, averaged a career low in points, and assists were about an assist and a half lower than last year.
Overwhelmingly underwhelming performance for the Texas Longhorns on the men's side. And
Trey Johnson was just too good to not have average a bunch of points. But even then, it was him creating offense. The OU game, it was the perfect example that it was all him, because a player like that should never go 0-14 if you're creating some good looks for him. And to me, that was indicative of not creating looks for Trey Johnson. And what really was just, in my memory, and there's been worse Texas basketball teams in our lifetime for sure, but this was the most disappointing to me, just because I knew how good Trey Johnson was. We knew that going into the season. We expected at worst for this to be a tournament team that may not win in the first round. That was like the worst case scenario in my mind.
That was a round of 64 exit for this team. Would have been like, man, I feel like we definitely had a better team than that. That's a little bit of a disappointing outing, but hey, first year in the SEC, probably finished around 3rd or 4th in the SEC.
Granted, the SEC turned out a lot better than we expected. So
right.
ending where like Missouri did.
Top five and be somewhere where Mississippi State or Missouri is.
Yeah, like at 10-8 in conference, 9-9 at worst.
Flirting with a top 25 ranking all season long.
Yeah, instead they were never flirting with a top 25 ranking after they fell out of the rankings. I don't believe they ever came back into the rankings.
No, they didn't. They were ranked in that opening game against Ohio State and never got ranked again.
Yeah, and that was a fitting, normally teams like that will sneak back up in the rankings. Even the pollsters never trusted this team. And
they saw that first game against Ohio State and they were like, we're going to need to see a lot more.
Yeah, this was a Trey Johnson show, not a team basketball team. And that showed. And at some point that's on the coaching. And I mean, again, just progressively getting worse each season for Rodney Terry. And that's not going to cut it under Chris Del Conte.
Nope. They will have Vanderbilt on Wednesday night. They lose to Vanderbilt. It will be the last game of the season. If you are Trey Johnson fans, turn on the game. Just turn on the game. Watch number 20. Try to enjoy Johnson on the court for the Texas Longhorns this season for the last time, more than likely, if they end up with a loss, which I think we're both deciding that will probably be the case. But yeah, again, if you're a Trey Johnson fan, if that's the only reason why you would even watch Texas basketball, like it is mine, turn it on and just watch number 20. Don't watch anybody else. Don't watch Rodney Terry on the sideline. Don't watch anybody else. You'll just get frustrated. Just watch number 20. Enjoy it while we can because it's only going to be here this season, and then he will be going to the NFL or the NBA draft, not the NFL draft. He is not Rico Gathers. So, Jake, last thing we will touch on is Texas baseball over the weekend. A clean sweep over Santa Clara, a 3-0 sweep. First game was 4-2, second game 8-3, and then a 6-1 victory to round it out. That makes Texas a historic 13-1 for the best start since 2005, the year that they won a national title. Wow, I didn't realize. I just put that together that it was a 05 year. Or was it I guess 05 in baseball is different than the 05 in football.
It was the same academic year, I believe. If I remember right, it was the same academic year.
Okay. All right.
But anyway, I could be, that's
because I feel like it's the 05-06 championship game for football. And then that would have been 05, the year before prior 05 starting is when Texas baseball won the national championship, going into the Texas football season that won the national championship. But like you said, academically, I guess it's the same. I don't know. Sports in college just confuses me. Anyway, yes, great historic start for Texas baseball. Is this the Schloss effect? Is this full Schloss effect?
Yeah, I mean, it is without a doubt. I mean, they weren't doing this under Pierce. Even in years they were good, they would always start slow. Now, does this mean they're going to be a top 3 team in the SEC? I don't know.
No. Oh, sorry.
I hope so, but I don't know. I mean, SEC play is going to get nasty real quick.
Yeah.
It starts out Mississippi State they need to win that series. I mean, you got to win that first series. The Mississippi States, which are a fringe ranked team, you got to beat the teams that are unranked or on that fringe of being ranked. It doesn't mean you got to sweep them, but those are the series that you have to win. If you're Texas baseball, to have a chance to be in that upper echelon of SEC teams, because you're not going to win every series against the Tennessees, the LSUs.
Yeah.
Georgia's ranked really high this year. You're not going to win every series against some of those top teams. If A&M gets their act together, Oklahoma's really good this year. You're going to lose, some of those series. And it just becomes really important to me to beat the teams that you're expected to beat. And I'd say Mississippi State is a team that Texas is expected to win the series of. Maybe not get a sweep, but expected to at least go 2-1. So this will be a big weekend. I'll be watching the games. I'm excited to watch this team enter SEC play. It's been spotty on being able to see them in non-conference because of it being on every streaming service ever that charges you $30 a month to watch. But it's going to be a big start.
How are we ranking the wrapping up of non-conference play?
As far as like a grade, I
Yeah.
mean an A.
It's an A, right? Like, I mean,
It's not an A plus because they blew the first game against Louisville, and you are one out away from being undefeated.
yeah,
But it's an A. I mean, you have wins over Ole Miss,
they've
who's looked.
exceeded expectations, have they not?
Yeah, I mean, the worst baseball they've played was the Dartmouth series.
And that was a cold weather.
And that was a
nasty-
disgusting weather series.
Yeah.
That couldn't have been fun to play in.
No.
I mean, the Washington game got a little ugly at times, but you still found a way to win. And in baseball, it's a lot about just finding ways to win when your pitcher has an off game or your bats aren't hitting. And they found ways to do that. There's been games where the pitching is carried the way. I mean, they won those games in the Las Vegas Classic 10-9, 10-5, 15-6. Then they beat A&M Corpus Christi 15-5. Then the bats cooled off a little bit. They scored 4, 8, and 6 and held Santa Clara to 2, 3, and 1. You know, just they've had games where the pitching's been fantastic. They've had games where I'd say the starting pitching has been pretty much fantastic all year. They've had games where the bullpen hasn't been quite as good, but still better than last year, and that's the Max Wiener effect. We're going to talk a lot about the Max Wiener effect on this podcast.
The Wiener effect for this team is very strong.
Yes, very strong. Huge, some would say.
Yes, some would say it's very large.
Yes, but they do have UT Arlington on Tuesday, a game they should probably win. And then 3 games against Mississippi State. Then you got UTSA, who's a pretty good baseball team this year. And then you got LSU.
We're going to have to stop calling out teams that beat A&M because it'll be more teams that have beaten A&M than not.
True, but UTSA does actually have a good record.
I agree. But if we just keep saying, well, they beat A&M, it may be more teams. It may be every team on the schedule from here on out at some point.
I think they have actually in some of the there's so many rankings in college baseball, but
which is strange. Why can't we get this settled
and
down?
they're all drastically different.
Yeah,
I think there was some where A&M was unranked and some where they're like 21. Texas is up at like 6 in some and down at like 12 in others.
I just don't understand why we can't get it all at least cohesively enough to like 3 ranking systems. I mean, football's got like 2 or 3. That's fine. Like no one goes based off of any of them other than the AP poll. So why does the AP poll not do baseball? Well, I guess because the AP poll barely watches football. We can't expect them to watch all the baseball either.
Yeah, no. I mean, it should, but you have like Perfect Game America.
The AP poll barely does their job in football. I don't think I trust them to do much anything else.
That's fair, but at least then there's something that it feels like everyone bases their stuff off.
Yeah.
It feels like everyone just bases their rankings off whatever puts their team they like the highest.
Essentially, until Omaha comes around, then it's like, oh, we've got a good idea of who the best teams are.
Yeah, but I mean that's basically what they do. But UTA should just hopefully be a tune-up game for Texas. UTA is not very good this season. They're 4-8. They got demolished by Oklahoma State in 2 games. They lost 19-4 and 10-4. They lost their series to Houston.
And that game is tonight on SEC Network, by the way. So you can tune in and get a little preview before conference play starts up Friday night against Mississippi State.
Yeah, and hopefully just to tune up, and then things get rolling because you got Mississippi State, who's good on the road. Then you got LSU at home, and LSU is a very good baseball program.
And you've got UTSA in the middle of both of those. So should be a good stretch of baseball coming up for the Longhorns, and a very telling stretch of baseball. I think after this weekend, going into the following weekend, we're going to learn a lot about this team outside of the best start since they've had since 2005.
Very excited to see the Mississippi State series, see if Texas can win that series 2-1. I'm very excited to see him play number 2 in the country, LSU.
Yep.
See if you can, find a win. That's the first goal. I think the goal going into that series
within the conference.
See if you can win one of them. You're at home. See if you can win one, ideally the first one, and then try to take the series.
Yeah.
But I think realistically going into that, the goal's got to be you don't get swept. You prove that you can compete and win against those top couple teams, which happen to be the top couple teams in the country, by the way, in Tennessee and LSU.
Yeah, and we're looking to see the ace for these games. I mean, it's no more, resting guys. It's time to get your best guys out
The
on the mound.
bullpen will be condensed.
Yeah.
Tuesday nights is when you're going to see them try different bullpens, try different starting pitchers. You're going to see things on the weekends tighten up significantly. I would expect.
Yeah, I think in conference play against the top 3 team in the country in LSU, that you're going to be giving them everything you've got just about.
Right.
So we'll see.
Right now, by the way, in the top 7 of D1 baseball rankings, 5 of them are SEC.
Wow.
5. LSU 1, Tennessee 2, Arkansas 3. Arkansas cracks me up. They're always a top 3 baseball team and then lose in the super regional at home.
Yeah, I'm like, I don't think I ever remember a time where they've actually made it to Omaha.
Yeah, they call themselves the Omahogs, but never go to Omaha.
No, never actually stay there. Yeah.
Georgia 5, Florida 7. If you just went by top 25 rankings, right now Texas would end 6 or 7 because some people have OU 1 spot ahead of them.
Sure.
Some people have Texas 1 spot ahead of OU. So they would be damn near middle of the pack, despite being a top 12 to 13 team in the country.
Record wise, where is OU at?
They have lost the 1 game to DBU, but they're 14-1, I believe.
Okay.
But they have also beat a couple top 10 teams. So they are
they're
good. They're a good team with legit wins.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. Well, Jake, that's going to do it for today's episode. Again, we're going to get into softball for tomorrow's episode. So if you're a softball fan and you're like, whoa, we just had a great weekend. We just swept through the Ohio State Classic. We're getting there. Sorry, we're on limited time. Tomorrow's episode, we will discuss all things softball, getting into the number 3 Florida matchup as well over this weekend as the softball team gets going in conference play as well. So, but for Jacob Jimerson, I'm Tanner Carlson. This has been your daily fix for all things Texas Longhorns right here on All In Horns. Remember, like, share, and subscribe. And as always, welcome.
All in Sports Network. We love sports.